Stephanie McMahon has been an authority figure, off and on WWE television for several years. In more recent years, though, her character is evolved into one that constantly buries and scolds the wrestlers that she's in charge of. Things have gotten so bad that when she does this to the wrestler, it takes several weeks, sometimes months, for the wrestler to recover from this burial. And even though it's just an angle for television, it actually hurts the wrestler's long-term career. A lot of the wrestlers on this list are still big stars, but they could have been even bigger stars if Stephanie McMahon wouldn't have buried them. Number 10. A few months back, Dean Ambrose started up the Ambrose Asylum, a talk show that happened in the ring every week on Raw. After hosting the show for a few weeks, Stephanie McMahon ended up canceling the Ambrose Asylum and ended up scolding Dean Ambrose live on television for several minutes. This happened backstage, this happened in the ring, it went on and on and on. Stephanie McMahon dressed down Dean Ambrose and made his character look weak. Number 9. In late 2015 and early 2016, Stephanie McMahon was involved in the Triple H Roman Reigns saga, which meant she had to be backstage and in the ring with Roman Reigns, cutting promos on him that would go on and on and on for several minutes. She'd slapped him, she would try to slap him and he would block it. She would constantly bury him on television and verbally abuse him. Most of the time he would just stand there and take it like a wimp, but occasionally he would stand up to her. And at one point, he did accidentally spear Stephanie McMahon. Having Stephanie bury him once is bad enough, but to do it on a weekly basis is just too much. And look at where Roman Reigns is today, a shell of his former self. Number 8. A few years back, Brie Bella had a feud with Stephanie McMahon that cultivated at SummerSlam. The original concept of this feud was to get over Brie Bella in a big way, but all it did was bury her. Every single week, Stephanie McMahon would come out there, she would bury Brie, she would bury Daniel Bryan, her husband, constantly, week in, week out. She would get into fights with her, and not only did Stephanie McMahon bury Brie Bella, but she also would tower over her. Stephanie McMahon is several inches taller than Brie Bella. This all came to a head when Stephanie McMahon defeated Brie Bella and put the final nail in the coffin. And now Brie Bella is retired. Number 7. This next burial took place in Flair country, Greensboro, North Carolina. In the ring you had Stephanie McMahon, Ric Flair, Charlotte, and Natalya. This was for a contract signing for a match between Charlotte and Natalya for the WWE Women's title. Flair was in Charlotte's corner at the time. He was managing her. For whatever reason, Ric Flair ends up getting slapped by Stephanie McMahon. She berates him in Flair country in North Carolina. This was one of the most ridiculous burials that I've ever seen. And of course, Ric Flair, when he got slapped, he took a bump. He did the Flair flop. And it was probably the most embarrassing moment of Ric Flair's wrestling career, all thanks to the writers and Stephanie McMahon. Number 6. Back in the day, Chris Jericho used to be the one that would bury Stephanie McMahon on a weekly basis. But now things have changed. Recently, over the past year or two, Chris Jericho has been buried week in, week out by Stephanie McMahon. One of the main things that Stephanie would do is Chris Jericho would be backstage and she would make fun of him, including his height. It seems to me this burial is all Stephanie McMahon. I don't think the writers had anything to do with this. The prior wrestlers in this list and the ones coming up may have been all the writers doing. She may have had nothing to do with any of those. But with this one, I think that she was so embarrassed deep down inside that she had to be humiliated every single week by Chris Jericho with him making fun of her that she now wanted to get back at him. Stephanie McMahon is good friends with Chris Jericho. She's the one who always wants him to come back. And she was even on his podcast once on the WWE Network. But it seems to me the real reason why Chris Jericho has come back so many times was so Stephanie McMahon could bury him. And look at Chris Jericho now. He's a mid-carder. Number 5. Ever since Shane McMahon has returned to the WWE, he has been put into promo segments involving him and Stephanie McMahon. And every single time this happens, she buries him, constantly makes fun of him, and makes him look like a dummy. Yes, there are times that Shane McMahon flubs lines, but should he be constantly called out on it? When Stephanie McMahon is in the ring with Shane McMahon, you can tell that she hates his guts. For real. And from what I've heard, she really does hate him and wishes he wasn't in the company anymore. She actually cannot believe that he is still there, and she cannot wait until he's gone. And you can see it every single time when she cuts a promo on him that she wants him to leave as soon as possible. Because she wants to make sure if Vince McMahon retires or passes away, that she and Triple H will be the sole owners of the company. Number 4. This one is really bizarre. Back in 2013, The Big Show was constantly confronting the Authority and ended up feuding with a member of the Authority, Randy Orton. Big Show would constantly interfere in the Authority's plans, and he became an instant enemy of the Authority, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. So you know what that meant? Stephanie McMahon had to constantly berate The Big Show every single week on television, slapping him, making him cry. But the most bizarre aspect of this storyline was when Stephanie McMahon actually pretended that The Big Show was Andre the Giant. Now we know back in WCW that The Big Show was known as the Giant, and for a while there they pretended that he was Andre's son. But that's not what WWE was going for. They were actually pretending that The Big Show was Andre the Giant, and here's why. Stephanie McMahon once came out to the ring and pretended that when she was growing up as a kid, that Big Show was almost like a father figure to her. And that's ridiculous because the age difference between The Big Show and Stephanie McMahon is only about 3 or 4 years. So how in the heck could Stephanie McMahon grow up as a kid idolizing The Big Show? In the end, this weekly burial, slapping, crying, basically cost The Big Show his career. Ever since this happened, The Big Show has never been the same. Number 3. This burial happened backstage, a week after Charlotte had fired Ric Flair as her manager. And you want to know what Stephanie McMahon did? She scolded Charlotte for firing Ric Flair, even though, not that long ago, Ric Flair was slapped by Stephanie McMahon. This was bizarre, and she went on and on and on, burying Charlotte for 2 or 3 minutes. Charlotte has not recovered from this, and I don't think she'll ever be the same. Number 2. If you want to talk about a wrestler getting buried, it's Daniel Bryan. Besides Triple H burying Daniel Bryan on a weekly basis, Stephanie McMahon would also bury Daniel Bryan. But one of the great things about Daniel Bryan is for some reason the crowd never gave up on him. Even though Stephanie and Triple H would come out every single week and bury him, calling him a troll, calling him a B-plus player, this and that, slapping him, beating the crap out of him. Together, both of them would beat the crap out of Daniel Bryan. In the end, when Daniel Bryan had to relinquish the undisputed WWE Championship, Stephanie McMahon actually came out to the ring and ended up slapping Daniel Bryan in the face. Obviously, at the time, this was done to continue the feud once he came back. And Bryan did come back, but it was only for a few short months. Another thing that Stephanie McMahon did to bury Daniel Bryan was that she actually stole his yes chants. She would constantly do yes chants herself, and she still does them to this day. Number 1. Seth Rollins was dressed down on a weekly basis by Stephanie McMahon, but in a different way. It was more like she was his mom, and he was her son. This was a bizarre storyline. They were building up to Seth Rollins turning on Stephanie McMahon and Triple H of the Authority. This never happened. Whether it was the writers, Stephanie herself, or Triple H, or Vince, they wanted Seth Rollins to come off like a little kid. And if you look at the ratings at the time, people saw Seth Rollins as a little kid. Seth Rollins is a very talented wrestler, but because of this Authority storyline, having him be a patsy, a pawn to the Authority, it really affected his career. Luckily, he is not associated with Stephanie or the Authority anymore, but I still see the remnants of this childlike character in Seth Rollins. Hopefully one day he'll shed this character completely, and maybe a babyface run would do that.